Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I will be taking you through some of the topics you are expected to cover for your CSEC exams. And I will be doing so by examining a few topographic maps. Uh, as a disclaimer, this is not meant to go into a whole lot of details on any one topic. All right, this is just meant to give you an overview. All right, so the first question on your exam will be a map work question with you being asked to examine a topographic map. So we are looking at a topographic map. This topographic map is showing the Montego Bay area in St. James, Jamaica. All right, and one of the skills that may be tested is your ability to give locations of different places and features. All right, so you can give location by using 4 and 6 figure grid reference. You can also give location by using the compass point or even angular bearing. So for example, if you are asked to give the location of Mount Salem, you could use grid reference and you would therefore say that Mount Salem is located at 1416. 14 is the easting line to the left of the feature and 16 is the northing line to the bottom of the feature. You could also be asked to give the location or give the direction of the school at Grand Villa from the church. What I would encourage you to do is just what I've done on this map. Just draw a line connecting the two places. Then you draw a north to south line through the reference point. The reference point is the church in this case. It is any feature that comes after the word from within the question. So since it says the direction of the school from the church, we know that the church is a reference point. And once you have drawn these two lines, it will be easier for you to read the compass. All right, so in this case, the school is located to the northeast of the church. Okay. Now, we can gather a lot of information from maps, and the examiner will test your ability to gather information from the map. All right. So, for example, you could be asked to talk about the drainage of the map. All right. Drainage refers to surface water bodies on the surface. Um, it could include ponds and lakes. We could include swamps, for example. But the main drainage feature that we usually talk about are rivers. All right. So on this map, we notice that the Montego River is flowing in a general east-west direction and ends in the Montego Bay. All right, so Montego Bay, the place is actually named after an actual bay called Montego Bay. All right. Another thing that we could talk about, if you observe well, is the drainage pattern. um, the rivers on this map are meeting at generally an acute angle, all right, and therefore they form a tree-like pattern. Thus, we would conclude that this is a dendritic drainage pattern. All right. Based on your syllabus, you are required to know three types of drainage patterns. The dendritic that we just looked at, which is the tree-like pattern, which usually develops over uniform geology. That is where the rocks are basically the same. Trellis is another type of drainage pattern and usually develops where there are alternating bands of hard and soft rocks, and we find these commonly in folded landscapes. Then we have radial drainage pattern. We usually find these where we have conical hills like volcanic hills. All right. Uh, let's move on. We could also be asked to talk about settlement. And if we're talking about settlements, one of the things that we could talk about is settlement pattern. The three main settlement patterns are linear settlement pattern, where the buildings form a line, dispersed settlement patterns, where the buildings are scattered, and nucleated settlement pattern, where the buildings are clustered at a point. So, for example, if we look at grid square 1213, we notice that the buildings are clustered together, and so we know that this is a nucleated settlement pattern. All right. So another thing we notice about this area is that it is generally a coastal area. And so we can look at the map again and we can talk about the coast, the shape of the coast, the types of coastal landforms there, as well as other features along the coast and the way the coast is being used. So if you look closely, you notice that there are two main coastal ecosystems. We have mangroves and we also have coral reefs. Now, the coral reefs and mangroves are important marine habitats. Because they are important marine habitats, they are also fishing grounds and are therefore important to the fishing industry. The coral reef and mangroves are also important tourist attractions. All right. So mangroves and coral reefs are important because of their ecological values as well as their economic values. So it is important that a balance be maintained so that we can benefit both from the economic value as well as the ecological value. And we want to ensure that um, future generation is able to benefit from both the ecological as well as the economic values of these precious resources. All right. In order for that to happen, we need to carry out what is known as sustainable development. Sustainable development may be defined as development that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. This means that through sustainable development, our natural environment and resources, including our fisheries, must be preserved. So this means that both fishing as well as tourism must be carried out in a sustainable manner. But this is not always the case. Notice on the map the existence of the Montego Freeport, which is a cruise ship port. Now, several environmental damage can result from cruise ships while they are traveling as well as while they are docked along the port. For example, the sea may become polluted from the waste that is released from the cruise ships. This will in turn affect the coral reefs that need to a clean environment to survive. The fuel consumption can also release greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Sometimes, while the ship is docked at the port, the motor is left running, and this is burning fuel, which will contribute to the release of greenhouse gas, which we know can lead to global warming. All right. In order to create these kinds of ports, a lot of the time the coastal environment is altered. All right. Not only are mangroves and coral reefs destroyed in the process, sometimes the dredging that has to take place will change up the flow of the sea, and therefore that can affect coastal processes. All right, so bear some of these things in mind uh, if you're asked to talk about the environmental impact of the cruise ship tourism. All right. Uh, Fishing can also do much damage to the coastal ecosystem, and therefore, to preserve these resources along the coast, sustainable fishing must be carried out. This include having closed seasons so that the fish can get a chance to uh, mature and reproduce. Having protected areas is also a good strategy, as it prevents fishermen from just fishing as they like or whenever they like. In some places, fishermen will have to obtain a license before they fish, and certain fishing methods, for example the use of gill nets, are prohibited in some places. uh, Another mitigation strategy, which helps in sustainable development, is uh, banning the fishing of some species of fish that are considered to be endangered. All right. Now, this other topographic map is showing Ocherius which is located in St. Anne, Jamaica, and is also another coastal area uh, where tourism is carried out. Notice we also have coral reefs in this area. And again, this is a tourist attraction in the area. Another tourist attraction shown on the map are beaches. All right. Now, a beach is a depositional coastal landform. If you notice within Ochereus Bay, we see a large stretch of beach. Now, the bay itself is not a depositional landform, it is an erosional landform. So, we can talk about two broad categories of coastal landforms. We can talk about, as I said, erosional landforms and depositional landforms. All right. Let's go into a little bit more details about these. All right, so erosional coastal landforms include bays, as I said before, headlands, cliffs, wave cut platforms, caves, arches, stacks, and stumps. These landforms are the result of coastal erosion caused by waves. There are four main types of coastal erosion. All right. So we have abrasion, which is where the material being carried by the sea hit against the coast and cause the land to be worn away. This often occurs along cliff faces, and is due largely to destructive waves. Then we have hydraulic action, where the land is worn down by the pounding effects of the water, the sea, or when the water is forced into cracks, causing them to expand and break apart. Again, this kind of erosion occurs mainly when we have destructive waves. Now, hydraulic action is a physical process. The water can also erode the land chemically. And if this happens, then the process we're talking about is solution. Another physical erosion process is attrition, and this occurs where the materials that are being carried by the sea hit against each other and break up. A lot of the material that result from attrition uh, serves as sediments that build up depositional landforms, which we will talk about soon. All right, so let us look at this animation showing how some of the erosional landforms are created. Now, depositional landforms include beaches, spits, bars, and tombolos. Depositional landforms are created when materials are transported over a certain distance and then are dropped when the energy is not enough to continue to transport the materials. In terms of transportation, materials uh, can be carried up and down the beach by swash and backwash, uh, especially where the coastline is swash aligned. All right. So as long as the swash is greater than the backwash, then the materials will be deposited along the coast, and this will create beaches, which is one of the main depositional landform. All right. Then we also have another type of transportation process. This is longshore drift, and longshore drift is the zigzag movement of material along the shore. It also involves a swash and backwash, where the swash is controlled by the prevailing wind, and the backwash is controlled by gravity. Deposition occurs along the coast when as I said, when the sea loses energy and drops the load it has been carrying. All right, and deposition occurs under certain conditions. For example, when waves enter shallow water, where the waves enter sheltered areas such as bays, uh, where the winds are weak and therefore the waves are more of a constructive type. There is also It also occurs where there is plenty supply of material. Let us take a look at some of the depositional landforms and the way they are formed. All right. So we have swash aligned beach, we have drift aligned beach, we have spit, we have tombolo, as well as bars. Okay. Now we are looking at another topographic map. This is a topographic map of Kingston. Notice that to the south we have a depositional feature. This is a tombolo. The materials which make up the tombolo originate both from the local coastal area as well as materials that have been transported from far away. All right, some of the materials are carried down to the coast by rivers. All right. Now, within the tombolo, between the tombolo and the coast, we see an area of deep water. This is the Kingston Harbor, and many industries are located along the coast and benefit from the Kingston Harbor, especially for trading purposes. All right, one such industry is the Jamaica Flour Mills. This location is particularly important since most of the raw materials used in the industry are imported from abroad. Like other industries, the Jamaica Flour Mills provide employment, contribute to the country's GDP, help to raise government revenue, and so on. Close to the Jamaica Flour Mills is another industry, the Caribbean Cement Company. The location of this industry along the coast also allows it to easily import any needed items from abroad as well as to export. In addition, it is able to get a lot of its raw materials through mining along the hillside. Now, both industries also benefit from the nearby roads as well as the large population of the area. The large population in Kingston is largely owed to the fact that the city is built on the Ligony Plain, which makes construction of roads and buildings easier. If you did not know that this was the Ligony Plain, you could identify the plain by the general absence of contour lines. All right. We can notice a great contrast between the land use on the plain with that on the adjacent mountain, which is the Long Mountain. While the plain is generally a built up area with many roads and buildings, there is very little vegetation. The mountain, on the other hand, is largely covered by vegetation, and while the roads are generally straight, on the plain, we see that the roads are more winding on the mountain. Next, let's examine a topographic map of Port Antonio. Unlike Kingston, Port Antonio is which is located in the parish of Portland, is a very hilly area. Notice how closely spaced the contour lines are. The built up area is not as extensive as that in Kingston. Development is concentrated in the small area along the coast. But as we move away from the coast, we notice that the land use changes significantly. We notice there are less social services, and the straight main roads give way to some more winding roads. Notice that the population, which is indicated by the buildings, is also less dense as we move away from the coast. All right, so let's look on the map in grid square 2514. If we examine this area, we notice that there are a number of named buildings. These include churches, schools, health center. All of these are land uses. All right. So many of the land uses that we have talked about so far are created by people, but we also have natural land use. All right. Natural land use is vegetation. So if you're asked to talk about land use, you can talk about uh, vegetation, you can talk about the buildings, you can talk about the economic activities, and so on. When you examine land uses, try to also determine some of the reasons that these land uses may be located where they are. All right, so the final topographic map that we will look at is a map showing the Cockpit country in Jamaica. This is an area located away from the coast, which means that the landforms are not created by waves. The landforms, the land is lowered by other processes of denudation. All right. Remember, denudation includes erosion, mass wasting, and weathering. This area that is being shown is largely influenced by weathering. Now, weathering may be defined as a gradual disintegration and decomposition of rocks in situ. The term in situ suggests that unlike erosion, which we have looked at, weathering does not move the materials as it breaks up the rock. This is because while erosion is caused by moving agents, weathering is the result of atmospheric and biological processes. So we can categorize weathering into three main categories. We can talk about chemical weathering, physical weathering, and biological weathering. Chemical weathering includes carbonation, solution, and hydrolysis, and it involves changes in the composition of the rocks. Physical weathering does not involve any change in the composition of the rock. It simply breaks up the rock into smaller pieces. Biological weathering, it can be both physical as well as chemical. But what puts it in a different category is that it is the result of plant and animal activity. For example, plant roots growing in rocks, which cause the rocks to break up. All right, so notice on the map that besides the contour lines that tell us the changes in height, we're also seeing some darker circles. These represent depressions, which are common in these limestone environment. And so, since we're seeing depressions among the hills, the limestone feature that we're looking at um, is Cockpit. All right. Uh, Cockpit is located within the Cockpit country of Jamaica. And this feature generally forms an egg tree pattern. Now, the Cockpit country has been at the center of much controversy because, like the mangroves and the coral reefs, they provide both economic as well as ecological benefits. Uh, the area has a number of endemic species, but it also has valuable minerals, and so uh, the area has been sought for its bauxite mining potential. All right. All right. So I will not go any further. I hope that this video gave you a good overview of the topics. And as I said before, uh, you will still need to go to study the various topics in more detail. All right. So thank you very much for watching. Remember to like, to share, and to subscribe.